Hello, everyone. Good morning. Happy Saturday. Yay, it's Saturday. This has been a week. It's definitely been a week for us in the stores. I'm sure the same is true for most of you out there, but it's nice to know that we have so many Slope family members sticking with us and coming in and shopping and hanging out and still working in your gardens, and feels like just a good time to kind of encourage one another. Happy New Year, all those things. Hope you guys are all good. Welcome to today's class. We are with Dan Alexander today. Woo woo! Seed Starting 101. Definitely the time of year to be looking into starting seeds for your spring gardening. So this is a really aptly timed class. Of course, Jen is on it as usual. Really excited to have everybody here today. Really excited to have Dan back giving us the scoop on how to, when to, what to, all the interesting pieces. Before we get into today's class, just a couple little notes. Please hit up the Q&A if you have any questions. You're welcome to raise your hand if you need to, but the Q&A is probably the easiest place if you have any questions while we're going through. If you miss something, if you have some questions that I can answer or that I can pass on to Dan, that's the best place to do it. Also, at the end of the seminar today, we'll have a survey. So definitely stick around at the end so that you can fill out the survey and, give us your thoughts on the class. That would be awesome. In terms of what's coming up over the next month, obviously today we have seed starting with Dan. Later yours truly this week on Wednesday, what to do in your garden this month. That's going to be a really fun class, short, but just to give you an idea of what to be concentrating on again this time of the year to get your garden ready for everything coming up in spring. It's an exciting time to get things prepared and kind of get the groundwork laid. Then on the 22nd, how to make seed balls, which is a really cool thing to do with your kids, to do with any, young people that you have in the house. Maybe a fun project to keep everybody busy while we go back and forth as to whether our kids are in school or what. So that'll be fun. Then on the 29th, an introduction to fruit tree pruning. Elizabeth Ruiz is back, and she is awesome and full of information about how to prune back your fruit trees and how to get everything ready for summer fruit. And then organic rose care is starting out our February on the 2nd, just to get into, how to take care of your roses and how to do it in the most environmentally friendly way. So that's kind of our schedule for the next month or so. You can always hit up our website. There's tons of information there about what to expect and what is coming up. Looks like Dan is ready to go. Again, if you guys have any questions or need anything, the Q&A is the best place. And hit up the survey at the end, okay? Thanks so much. I'm going to turn it over.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming here to virtual Slope land. Jen and I are here in the Slope studios, ready to talk about seed starting. Seeds are, of course, the way that plants reproduce sexually. Plants also can be reproduced asexually. That's what clones are, essentially. You take cuttings and make the same plant over and over again. Seeds give plants their genetic diversity and are the way that they adapt to changes in the environment. By having little modifications that will work better as things change. So genetic diversity is critical to plants, just as it is to animals. And pollen and ovules have to get together to exchange DNA and store them in the seeds. We'll do a little bit of chit chat here about what seeds really are and why they're the way they are. And then we'll get to talking about how to, and that's kind of the fun part because you get your hands dirty. Seeds are basically plant embryos, fertilized eggs that have developed all the primordial structures that are going to become a plant. Tissues that will become roots, tissues that will become stems, tissues that will become leaves. Flowers generally develop later in the plant's life. Most of the plants that we deal with in the world are what we call dicotyledons, and they come up from the ground with 2 leaves at a time. The other big group of plants are monocotyledons. They come up with just 1 leaf, and that would be typically grasses, orchids, many kinds of plants. But the plants you usually are starting in your garden, with the exception maybe of catgrass, which maybe we'll plant, are dicotyledons, and beans are the most wonderful example of those. So Jen, if you'll get ready to zoom in here a little bit. I put some beans in, these are Kentucky Wonder beans, just in a pot with some potting soil, and I labeled it, fortunately. This was the 29th of December, these were planted, and they were just stuck in a kind of cool room, about 60 degrees, I would say, on average, maybe a little cooler at night. And boom, up they come. And you can see here that the bean comes up with these 2 kind of fat halves of the bean. This is the part that you would eat if you had cooked the bean. It stores mostly carbohydrates, some protein, a little bit of fat to nourish the plant as it grows. And then true leaves come up. You can see here 2 at a time, and in the case of a bean, and those are going to look like real bean leaves and then just keep vining up. So typically the plant will sprout, give us the 2 cotyledon leaves, and then true leaves will grow after that. The cotyledon leaves pretty much all look alike on most plants, and it's very hard to identify a seedling by its cotyledon leaves. There may be color differences, texture differences, but they're all pretty darn similar. And it isn't until the true leaves grow that you can really identify what you've got. And that's one of the reasons why we recommend some weeding before you plant seeds out in your garden, for instance, so that you're more likely to be able to identify what you planted on purpose as opposed to what's just popping up in the way of weeds, because they'll all look pretty similar. Beans, it's too early, by the way, to plant beans out in the garden. Beans don't like the cold weather. If you wanted to put something out in the garden now, it would be peas, not beans. And you'd want to start them inside. And you could do it the same way I did with these. Just peas have a nice big seed, and you could just put it into a pot and let them sprout, and then transplant them out in the garden. Beans in the ground will have to wait until the weather warms up, and we'll be talking about that when we talk about planting the spring garden in about March.
Yeah.
March 7th, I think we're gonna talk about that. Now, there are some really interesting seeds, and the variations are vast. The largest seed in the world is about this big and can weigh over 20 pounds. It is a cocoa, basically a huge coconut from the Maldives, and designed to, I guess, probably float around until it finds some solid ground take root in. The tiniest seeds are orchid seeds, and they can be millions in a gram of seeds. They're like fine dust, and have to find just the exact right circumstances to grow, and that's why they make millions and millions of them. They're dispersed by the wind and hope to land in the little crevice of a tree or something like that where they can grow. Obviously, not very many of them make it. Seeds come in so many sizes and shapes. We know some of them from the herbs that we use. You know, caraway seeds have that nice crescent shape and lots of bumps and wrinkles on them. I don't know why they're shaped like that. Some seeds are designed to be eaten by animals and excreted, and others are dispersed by the wind. The most elaborate, probably of the wind-aided ones, might be maple seeds, which have these two wings and makes them spiral around in the air, or milkweed seeds that have a feathery sail and can go for miles on the breeze. So there are lots of ways they get around, and lots of reasons to want to encourage the genetic diversity that seeds provide. I think in gardening, predictability is overrated. I think surprises are a good thing, and you get surprises when you plant things from seed, because even if they are a black crim tomato, which has been around for many generations and is a beloved heirloom tomato, not every one of them is going to be exactly the same. They are not an engineered hybrid or anything like that. They're just a natural group of plants that have been selected over the years for the same characteristics, but they're not all identical. And to me, that's a wonderful thing. Well, choosing which seeds to grow is probably the first step that we have to take, and that has to do with season. It has to do with what facilities we have available for growing seeds, and it has to do with our goals. What do we want to grow, and why are we growing it? Probably most of us spend most of our seed raising time on edible plants, but we can also grow ornamental plants. Lots and lots of annual and perennial flowers are available by seed and easy to grow. And even larger shrubby plants can be grown by seed if you want to take the time and energy to do it. I always recommend that people look into growing milkweeds for the monarchs. This is showy milkweed, Asclepias speciosa, which at one time was native, grew a lot around the area, the Bay Area here. Now has been pretty much eradicated by stock grazing, not by the cows, by the way, or the sheep, but by the farmers, ranchers, because if the cows eat too much milkweed, it's not good for them. So it pretty much got chopped out. I brought the showy milkweed here today to get started because it requires some special treatment in order to sprout well. And we'll talk about that in a little while. There's another native milkweed called narrowleaf milkweed, which is usually pretty available in the spring as little plants, but also very easy to start from seed and doesn't require the same kind of processing as the showy milkweed. And so if you get a packet of narrowleaf milkweed seed, you can just throw the seeds in a pot and start them up the way we'll be demonstrating doing it. And you'll have your milkweed starts that way. With milkweed, it's good to get the starts transplanted into their own separate pots fairly early in the process, because you don't want the roots grow before you see anything above the ground with a milkweed, and they can be quite long by the time you notice that the plant's growing. So you want to get them out of that little starter pot fairly soon, so that you have a healthy branched root system and not something that's just gone to the bottom of the pot and circled around. Just to let you know. In selecting the seeds, there's kind of a hierarchy of ease. In general, larger seeds are easier to deal with than smaller seeds. This means things like string beans, and for that matter, if you want to grow beans in order to harvest them dry later on in the season, any of those beans, pinto beans, that sort of thing, are easy to grow. They have a nice big seed that's easy to start. Peas, similarly, big, easy seeds. Radishes are a relatively large seed that sprouts very quickly and is easy to deal with. If you get into lettuces, I have a lettuce packet here somewhere, right here. Lettuces are fairly small seeds, and it doesn't mean they're difficult to grow, but a handful of lettuce seeds, I'm gonna come around to the camera here a little bit.
Sorry.
No worries. Lettuce seeds are fairly small. This is a mixture, so you can see they don't all look alike. This is it's called Gourmet Salad Mix by Lake Valley Organics. These are about as small as you're going to run into in typical edible gardening types of things. The cabbage family, like broccoli, cauliflower, have a bigger seed than this, kale, and tomatoes and peppers are a little larger than that too. So they're easy to deal with. And keep in mind that a packet of lettuce seeds has several, well, more than several hundred seeds in it. It's got a lot of seed, and you're going to end up with way more seed than lettuce you can eat. So if you go in there thinking I want 10 kinds of lettuce, think instead maybe I'll get a packet of mixed lettuces, and that'll give me plenty of lettuce of different kinds.
Do you have to thin it out, the lettuce?
Well, this depends on how you plant it. Jen's question was, do you have to thin the lettuce out? In general, you're going to plant more seeds than the number of plants you're going to keep. This is for several reasons. The first is you don't know which of the seeds is actually going to sprout. So if you pick one seed out of the packet, you may get one that is a dud, or it wants to wait 6 months before it sprouts. And you don't know the answer to that question. The second reason is you want to be able to pick and choose among your children, which are the strongest and healthiest, and you want to keep those. And if there are some that sprout that are not healthy and not growing vigorously, you're probably going to sacrifice those and use them in some other way, like in the compost pile. So if you plant a row of lettuce, say directly in the ground later on when the dirt is warmed up, you might make a little trench and sprinkle the seeds in, and you might get 6 or 7 sprouting up within a few inches of each other. And after they've grown for a week or so, you're going to pick and choose which ones are the strongest and get a decent spacing between them so that they can then each grow up without competing with each other. And they compete both for light and moisture and for space underground for the roots to grow. So they need a little bit of room each. In the March webinar, we'll talk more about how to harvest things like lettuce, and there are some differences in spacing depending on how you're going to harvest them. The long and short is, if you're going to let them become a head of lettuce, you need more space than if you're going to clip leaves as you grow. You can crowd them in more. But that's for another time. In general, obtaining seeds has become easier and easier over the years. There are more seed companies out there, and there are more interesting seeds available. We're no longer limited to Burpee's Big Boy tomatoes and a few others. The seed companies that we stock here in Mill Valley at this store are Botanical Interests, which has a fine array of both organically grown seeds and conventionally grown seeds. Lake Valley that I mentioned, it's the lettuce, and this is their milkweed. And then there are some specialty growers we bring in. Larner's Seeds in Bolinas specializes in native seeds. So this is a Hills of California wildflower mix. They have other wildflower mixes and then individual seeds of all kinds of flowers, grasses, trees and shrubs. Another nice wildflower grower is Pacific Coast Seed Company. And this is a Bay Area wildflower mix. And this is a lot of seeds. This is an ounce. Yeah, this is an ounce of seed. And you can see there are seeds of many sizes there. There's some big, looks like probably lupin seeds here, and then down to small poppy seeds that are pretty tiny. Then we have seed balls that somebody mentioned. Shannon, I think you mentioned that we have a seminar coming up on making seed balls. I'll show you what they look like. This is a commercially produced one by Wild Jewels. This is a red California poppy called Red Chief. And what they are is simply little balls of clay with the seeds inside. And the idea here is not to plant the seed balls underground, but to place them on top of the ground. This is sand here, but if this were soil, you would just place them on the soil, hopefully when the soil is wet. And then the clay will absorb the moisture and provide the right conditions for the seeds. And when the seeds recognize that the moisture and the temperature are correct, they'll sprout right out through the seed ball, and they end up looking, wouldn't say end up, they start to look like these little circular masses here. This is elegant Clarkia, which was planted on, the seed balls were placed on the soil on November 6th during our Gardening for the Birds webinar. And they are surrounded by a Larner's Seed Company mix called Marin Meadow Wildflowers, and planted at the same time. And you can see we've got a number of different looking things growing up among the Clarkia. These little guys are lupin, and there's some poppies, and who knows what else at this point.
It's a whole meadow in a pot.
It's a meadow.
Aw.
It's a meadow in a pot.
It's so cool.
What we did was just stick it all in the pot and put the pot out in the nursery yard and let it get rained on. And I don't think Well, we undoubtedly watered it when it was first planted, but we certainly haven't had to water it much after that. So that's kind of how the seed balls develop. And it's an old technique, and there were some funny guerrilla gardeners who like to make seed balls of wildflowers and then just chuck them around people's neighborhoods and that sort of thing and hope for the best. But they also, since they contain seeds, there are things that critters like to eat in here and they can smell them. So a squirrel will know if there are valuable seeds inside. So one of the techniques is to moisten the seed ball just with a squirt of water like this, and then sprinkle cayenne pepper on it. And that will help with the squirrels. It won't help with birds because birds are not sensitive to cayenne or to capsaicin, which is the active ingredient. But it may help with squirrels. Also, when I complained a little bit about the squirrels eating my seed balls to the Wild Jewels people, they sent me a bunch of strawberry baskets, plastic strawberry baskets. They apologized for the plastic, but to put over the seed ball. And then I thought you could use a little landscape staple, which are readily available, to keep the strawberry basket on top of it and keep the squirrels out of it, maybe. Whether it's really worth all that effort, I don't know. I know I've lost some to the squirrels, but I have many of them that I can see are growing at home. And so I think it's a workable and a fun way to go about planting.
Hey, Dan?
Yes.
Did you cover with anything when you laid the seed balls, like in that pot, for instance, that you've got there? Did you put any, topsoil, any planting mix, any potting soil since it's in a pot? Nothing.
No, the idea with the seed balls is to place them on the soil and then let the clay in the seed ball absorb moisture as needed, and to have a ball of seedlings come up. So you should always be able to see the seed ball.
Okay.
On top of the soil. Yeah, interestingly, they're not really designed to be buried. I don't know that means they wouldn't work at all, but I think most of the smaller seeds would be too deep if you buried the seed ball. That's my guess.
And then one more question before you move on. To your knowledge, is it kind of one plant, per ball, or is it a kind of a cacophony of goodies in each one?
Oh, I see what you mean. One type of plant. Yes, it is one type of plant per seed ball in the commercially designed ones. So for instance, this one's poppies, this one is milkweed, and this one is tidy tips, which is a California wildflower.
Follow you. But since it's a bundle of seeds in there, you should technically get multiple plants with multiple root balls, etc., right?
Yeah, let's look again at the ones that we planted over here, and you can see that we have got a lot of Clarkia growing there out of each seed ball.
Right.
And they will fight a little bit for dominance. I'm not going to thin them. I'm just going to let them grow.
Okay.
And we will report back at a later.
We should. We'll
seminar,
do, yeah, a couple months.
And follow the saga of the elegant Clarkia. Clarkia is also known as farewell to spring. And when you're walking around in the hills around the Bay Area, if you see Clarkia, you know that spring is over and the ground is drying out and it's getting to be summer. That's what Clarkia is all about. Okay. mixes for growing seeds in are a little bit important. You want to grow seedlings in a relatively sterile mix, not a real fertilizer heavy or decomposing organic matter heavy medium. Unlike your soil at home, which you do want to have all that in it. I mean, the soil in the ground or the soil in a potting container when the plant is bigger. When the seedling is tiny, it is vulnerable to all kinds of attack from funguses and bacteria. A process we call damping off, when a bunch of seedlings just suddenly die because they get attacked by a fungus in the moist, humid atmosphere that they start out in. So we want a relatively sterile mixture for them to germinate in and grow for just a little while. They have enough stored energy in those cotyledons to get them going, even in the absence of much nutrition in the soil. And so we take advantage of that and use a relatively sterile mix. You want it also probably to be slightly acid as opposed to alkaline. And that's pretty easy to achieve because there are very few mixes that you could either make or find at a store that would be alkaline in nature. You'd have to add dolomite lime or something like that to make them alkaline. So that's probably not an issue. There are commercially blended seed starter mixes like this one from E.D. Stone that Slope carries, called Seed Starter Potting Soil. It's about a 50-50 mixture of peat moss and perlite. Perlite is the white exploded volcanic rock, very light, and aerates the soil nicely. It doesn't hold a lot of moisture. Peat moss is acidic. It holds moisture very well, although it can be difficult to get wet to begin with. It's what we call hydrophobic when it's dry, and water tends to run off it rather than be absorbed by it. And so you have to kind of put it into a container or we'll cut open this bag if I can find my scissors. There we go. And if this is really dry, then what we have to do is add water to it and kind of massage it around. Fortunately, this bag is moist. And so you can see peat moss and little bits of perlite about evenly mixed. And this is a perfect medium for starting the seeds. It's very light. It holds moisture, but ideally has about the consistency of a wrung out sponge in terms of moisture. And it doesn't have a lot of decomposing leaves and things like that that would support a lot of fungal activity. You can make your own. There are bags of peat moss available and perlite, but if you're doing small amounts of seeds, one bag of the already mixed mixture is going to be dandy, and you will find that it's really easy to deal with. If it were dry as a bone, I would simply have added some water to it, let it sit for a while being maybe 15 minutes, and then start massaging it until it absorbed the water and adding more water as I need to. Now, an alternative to peat moss is coconut coir. This is a commercially packaged, came in a package with this label. This is a compressed block of coconut coir, which is just the husk of coconuts as they're processed, and is an alternative to peat moss. It comes compressed and dry like this, and they give you this bag
which we probably don't really need. We could have used anything. And then they say, put a couple of liters of water in. So we're gonna do that and then, whoops, check on it later. Sorry, Jen, bet you
That's okay.
wrote it there. We're gonna check on it in a little bit and see how it's doing. And it should simply absorb the water and expand, and then we can crumble it up and use it just like peat moss. It's not identical to peat moss. Chemically, it's not as acidic as peat moss, but it holds moisture about as well. And it does have the nice capability of absorbing water easily. It's not hydrophobic. So in some ways, it's a little easier to work with. If it gets dry, it's easy to get wet again. There is some discussion about, of course, about the sustainability of peat moss. I haven't come to a conclusion yet. There are arguments, and of course, arguments about coconut coir. While the coir is a byproduct and sustainable in that way, I'm not sure that all of the coconut groves are sustainable. And so I really don't know the answer yet on that one, whether it's better environmentally or not. But we have to use some kind of medium to get things going. And both of those are pretty good for the seed starting itself. Now we have lots of equipment laid out here in front of us. And the fact is that all you need generically is a container and some medium to grow the seeds in. And lots of these things are designed to make life easier for us, but none of them have to be used. But let me just show you a few of the ideas that are around and about for starting seeds. One of the simplest would be just a tray with cells in it, similar to the 6-packs you might have purchased flowers or vegetables in. And you fill them with soil or seed starter mix, as the case may be. And sow the seeds directly into the mix in the cells. And you end up with a tray. This is like a half a flat, and this is more of a full flat over here. These both come with a little dome, plastic dome that you can put over the top, which improves the humidity and can keep the temperature a little more even, and is probably helpful for getting things started. And I've put underneath this full flat here a heat mat. These are readily available either by themselves, or they can come in a kit with the flat and the little dome. And it's just a very simple heat mat that plugs in to the wall, and it uses, I think it says about 7 watts of
17
watts. And it basically raises the temperature about 10 degrees over the ambient temperature. So if your seeds are in a 50-degree atmosphere, this will give the soil about 60 degrees, which is generally about ideal for starting most seeds. You don't need it once the seeds are sprouted. You can just unplug the seed mat. You don't need it any longer. So you wouldn't be using it more than about 2 weeks for most seedlings. But I've used it when I was trying to sprout things in cooler weather, and it's very helpful for getting things to sprout more evenly. A lot of seeds will sprout even in cooler weather, but they do it very unevenly. And so you're waiting and you'll get one sprout one day and one a couple days later. And over a course of a month, you've got different things growing at different rates, and it's hard to manage. This is another idea. These are little peat pellets in this system. And it also has a dome. Peat pellets are just what they sound like. They're compressed peat with a little bit of a plastic, I guess, mesh around it. And when they get wet, they'll expand and the mesh will help keep them together. And they'll have a little hole in the middle for putting the seeds. And so they end up being a little pot to grow the seeds in, and you put the dome over it. You don't need any additional soil medium until the seeds have sprouted and the roots have grown a little bit. And then you can plant the whole peat pellet into a bigger pot or into the ground after the seeds have gotten going. So they're quite easy, and they're also available as sort of refills. This is a package of the peat pellets, and they come either in small packages like this of 20 or bigger packages of hundreds. But that's the peat pellet, and they're a pretty easy way to go.
That might be easier if you're doing this with kids, right? Because then you're not.
I think with kids this would be fun because
as
it's
messy.
kind of like those toys we used to get where you put them in water and they grow into a dinosaur or something like that.
Yeah.
These grow up as they get wet, so they're fun to observe.
Hey, Dan, can I ask a quick question about the heat mat? I'm sorry.
Heat mat, yep.
So with the heat mat, can you put it anywhere? Like, is there, and again, I know I'm asking you to kind of give product information that's so specific, it's maybe we need to just read the directions, but I get one of our attendees asked about whether you can put it on any surface. Do you know, or does it easily say, hey, don't put this on hardwood, or only put this on something where you've got, is it covered underneath so it protects whatever you put it on, or do you know? I can certainly look it up.
It says it's waterproof.
Well,
I think it's the underside in terms of whatever it's sitting on, you know what I mean? That might, okay, it has a nice, that's I guess what I should have asked is, hey, flip it over.
well, there are a couple of things there. You're not going to want to put this on a nice hardwood table.
Sure.
And you're not going to want to put the wet seed mess on the nice hardwood table.
Right.
So I think the answer is it doesn't feel to me like it's going to harm a surface by the texture of the mat.
Right.
It's kind of like a placemat, plastic placemat texture.
Can you feel the warmth on it when you put your hand on top of it? Like if it's plugged in?
Yes, you can.
But not really on the underside?
Well, yeah, you can feel it. The whole mat is warm.
Follow you.
It's not hot. It's a gentle warmth.
Got it.
But again, on a surface that has a coating like a lacquer or a polymer or something like that, the warmth together with humidity in the air could mar it, I would think. So I would put something else under it.
Okay.
And also remember, you're going to have to water the seedlings
Right.
from time to time.
So you need some protection anyway.
So yeah, you would need some protection from the water from the process that you're going through. Although certainly you could, this is light, and even with soil in it would be light. You could remove it, water it somewhere else, let it dry and on the bottom, and then put it back. So I think if you treat things carefully, it'll be pretty obvious what you can and can't do with it. But the temperature again is only. I'm not a good judge here, but it feels warm to me, so it's obviously more than 98.6 or whatever I am. or it wouldn't feel warm, I think.
I think it says like 70 to 85 degrees.
70 to 85 degrees.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So maybe it's not warmer than 98.6, but it's a very gentle warmth, and it's probably if you were to have a hot water bottle, an old-fashioned hot water bottle that's not really hot, it would feel kind of like that. And it's not moist, although I think moisture, and if it were off and on, moisture could condense under it, and then you would have moisture underneath it. But anyway, I don't know the real answer to that question. Let me just show you also these plantable pots. These are coir pots. Again, the coconut coir. You can also find these made of peat, and you can. I don't know if we still have the line, Shannon, but we had a line of cow poo pots that were made of
cow pots.
cow manure. They're called cow pots.
Yep.
Look very similar. And I thought that was a great idea to have the cow pots. They were odor-free, by the way, if you're wondering. These are also coir pots, I believe, that are a little more substantial. They're not as bendy as the little square ones there. And so if you were growing something that you might want to keep in the pot a little longer, these round ones are a little thicker, I think, and might last longer. But they're plantable again. The roots, if they're moist, the roots will go through them, and you can plant the whole thing in the ground and it'll be just fine. Now, some seeds, all seeds have a dormancy built into them so that they don't just sprout willy-nilly until they find the right conditions. They need moisture, they need the right temperature. Sometimes they need darkness, sometimes they need sunlight. Each seed has its own signals that tell it to wake up and start to grow, that conditions are right, that it can survive and grow into a plant and flower and reproduce itself. Some plants have a strong secondary dormancy that we have to overcome in order to get them to sprout when we want them to sprout. And many of the plants that grow in the Bay Area, for instance, out in the chaparral communities, require fire before the seeds will open. Some plants require a period of cold before they have to recognize they've been through a winter and that now it's warming up and spring has come before they'll sprout. And they're smart that way. One of the easiest methods for breaking dormancy in a lot of plants is to do what we call cold stratification. And sometimes when you buy seeds, I don't know if this package tells us that or not, but some of the packages tell you needs a period of cold stratification before it'll sprout. This is the showy milkweed again. And so I'm just going to show you what that means. Stratification is different than scarification. Scarification means scratching the seeds. And some seeds need that as well.
Like nasturtium, or is that nasturtium? Don't you do that?
Nasturtiums, for instance, often you take a file or even an emery board and just scratch the surface up. That allows the water to penetrate more easily and tells the seed it's time to sprout. Milkweed, the showy milkweed seeds are best cold stratified for about 2 months. And I'm going to find a baggie here about the right size. And I have, as I mentioned, sand over here. This is what's called horticultural sand or sharp sand. This is not playground sand. It's not beach sand. Beach sand and playground sand are usually out of rivers or off the beach, and they have had all the sharp edges knocked off of them by tumbling in the water. Sharp sand is dug out of the hillside and has sharp edges, not sharp that they can hurt you, but sharp meaning that they can scratch up seeds, and they can, the sharp edges will keep them apart from each other so that water and air can penetrate. Horticultural sand should not be used as play sand because of the silica dust that it can give off. It would be bad to breathe, and it shouldn't be used dry. Again, it can be dusty in that way. When it's wet, it's safe to use, and this is wet. It's just moist. This is about 2 handfuls. My hands are not real big. 2 handfuls of sand, slightly moist. If it were dry out of a bag, then a few spritzes of water would, maybe a tablespoon of water would be about right, mush it around. And then the Asclepias seeds, you don't get a whole lot in a package, by the way. And they don't want to come out either. There we go. Asclepias seeds are moderate in size, these little brown guys. And there's a little chaff in there with it, the white things. But this is probably what, 10, 20, 30, 40 seeds, something like that. A couple here that I dropped. And of these, probably half or so will be likely to sprout. But only after we put them in the sand, like so, and mix them around, yada, yada, yada. And then we're going to put them in the vegetable cooler section of the refrigerator for about 60 days. So I'm going to label them as Asclepias speciosa. And today is the 15th, 1/15/22. And if I were really clever, I would set my calendar to give me a reminder to take them out of the refrigerator in about 60 days. And at that point, they would be ready to go into a container in order to get them to sprout. In 60 days, it will be March, and the weather will be warm enough that I can do it outside. I wouldn't really need to do them inside at that point, and that's a perfect time to get those going.
And you don't have to keep like shaking the bag or anything. You just
No.
do it that one time.
No.
That's so cool.
One time, stick them in the refrigerator,
Yeah.
forget about them, and they will get the message that it's time to grow. Yeah.
Hey, Dan, is that only for Asclepsia or is that all around? I mean, like, is there a reason to not do that with everything that you're going to throw into, starters?
Yes, there is a reason not to do that with everything. The number one reason is most seeds that you're going to grow don't need it. And a lot of them, even in the refrigerator, will start to sprout in your plastic bag, and in 60 days, they're not going to be any good anymore. So it tends to be shrubs, perennials that need that kind of treatment, trees sometimes.
It'll say on the pack.
It should say on the package, if it's a decently packaged set of seeds, that these need to be cold stratified. And I know that the botanical interest seeds do say that on the ones that need it. It's not very many that they sell. I will show you a reference here. This is from the library here in Marin. This is a US Department of Agriculture publication, I think, or maybe not. But this tells you seed treatments for California native plants that people have discovered over the years are helpful for getting them to sprout. And it's just a series of charts that tell you, and most of them say no treatment is needed. And then some will say a period of cold stratification. Some will say boiling water. Some will say hydrochloric acid.
Oh my gosh.
Various kinds of treatments that basically nursery people and researchers have discovered are helpful for getting them going. But it's not something to stress over. I use the Asclepias as an example because a lot of people want to grow milkweed, and it can be frustrating when it doesn't sprout. But as I said, the narrow leaf milkweed, Asclepias fascicularis, sprouts quite readily without the treatment. And it's easier to grow in the garden, frankly. So that's a good one to start with, and then move on to the showy milkweed when you're more confident about growing them. Let's see. Obviously, in the ground directly, we're not going to be starting things in things like this. We're going to be planting seeds right in the ground. And the important things there are that you wait until the ground is warm enough for the seeds to sprout. Right now, our soils are probably somewhere between 40 and 50 degrees. If you go down an inch or two, you can put a thermometer in there and see. That's way too cold for 90% of the seeds. And even if they did sprout, it's too wet and cold, and there's still a chance of frost. And so the chances of them surviving would be very limited. And even plants that can make it through the winter don't necessarily make it as a little tiny seedling in those conditions. So we're going to wait to plant outside. The reason we plant inside, in part, is to get a head start so that by the time conditions are right, we've got little seedlings ready to go. And maybe we were 6 weeks ahead of the game than we would be if we waited until we can plant in the ground. And so that's kind of what this is all about, is getting that head start. On the other hand, there are also things that you can grow inside. If you got a cat, why not grow your own cat grass? It's just a mixture of wheat and oats and Hortium vulgare. I don't know what that is, in truth. Another grass, and it starts really easily. And with larger hard seeds like this, sometimes it's helpful to soak them overnight in water. This is another way of breaking or speeding up the dormancy a little bit. You just soak them overnight in water, dry them out, get rid of the excess water, and you could sprinkle them in a pot like this, or a little larger pot. Sprinkle a little soil over the top of them, just covering them. You don't need to bury them very deeply at all. Keep them moist until they sprout, and Kitty has kitty grass. And if you start a pot about once a week, then Kitty has kitty grass year round. Can't beat it. The kids can do it. It can be one of their jobs. Keep the cat in kitty rats. Now, let's see, where are we? I want to show you some fun things to do, and maybe this will be with kids, I don't know. But these are seeds that one finds in the neighborhood. These are recognizable acorns. This is these are all from a valley oak, which is the biggest deciduous oak that we have in California. And they were just laying on the ground. And so you can see that they send out a root first. And if this were a valley oak in the ground, it might send that root down several feet before it ever sends up the green part of the plant, the first leaves. This acorn is, if I peel off the shell here, we can see the cotyledons. These are the cotyledons right here, which are full of nutrition for the growing plant. And right in the middle, very tiny, maybe not even visible on the camera,
You can see it.
it's a little sprout that'll come up between the cotyledons. Now this one has some rot here. Acorns or oak trees make thousands and thousands of acorns every year. And their goal is simply to replace themselves. So over the 400-year life of an oak tree, if it produces one oak tree out of all those oaks, it's done its job. And so most of them get eaten. Many of them just rot away. A lot of them get run over by cars. But they have their special way of growing that long taproot, and this particular oak has to find groundwater in order to survive through the summer. This you may recognize as a California buckeye. Buckeyes similarly grow a very deep taproot, and they have a very big nut, which is full of nutrition. And after this taproot grows down several feet, then the tree will start to grow up. Most of them don't survive. The deer love the little seedlings and eat them right off. But again, they just have to produce one progeny, in order to keep the species going. And they're great fun if you collect them on a walk, a few of them, and just put them on some soil in a pot or something. They'll sprout, and you can grow a little buckeye tree for a while at least, and have a lot of fun with them. These beans over here, which were planted at the end of December, show you how you can have fun with the kids, number one, because they're so easy to grow, but also if you were to start these in about late March, then they could go out in the garden in April and be quite happy. And if I were going to sow them directly in the soil, I might want to wait till May, till things have warmed up even more. And they will have a pretty substantial root system. You can see here, they do a lot of growing very quickly. I guess there's a reason it's Jack and the Beanstalk is the story, because they grow very quickly. Let's see here. one of the things you need to do is calculate your time to start the seeds, and that's just a matter of working backwards. If it's going to be warm enough to plant my tomatoes out in the garden in, say, the middle of April, which is kind of true out here, then I want to have about 6 to 8 weeks before that for my seedlings to grow. And I need about a week for them to sprout. So I'm going to go about 7 to 9 weeks prior to the middle of April to start my tomato seeds, for instance. Peppers need even more warmth, so I'm going to wait about another 3 weeks or so to start the pepper seeds. I will show you just a quick last trick for seeds like peppers and tomatoes. I have a really easy system where I take a paper towel and wet it. That's all there is to it. Grab some pepper seeds, my favorite variety, Jimmy Nardello. Sprinkle the pepper seeds on the moist paper towel. It's just barely moist, by the way. In a secondary container here.
We'll be able to see these on your pepper class, probably,
Yeah.
when you do the pepper class.
Yep. There they are. Kind of spread them out a little bit. Fold it over, maybe give it another squirt. Come out. And then put it in the plastic bag. And this goes not in the refrigerator, but on top of the refrigerator, where it's about a few degrees warmer than the ambient temperature. Seal up the bag except for about 1 inch at the end, so you let a little bit of air go in. Put it on the refrigerator and check back in about a week. And they will start to sprout right inside the paper towel. And after they have developed a little root and a couple of little cotyledon leaves, then I just take them off of the paper towel and put them in individual pots and put them in a sunny window and let them grow for a while. Now, it's still too early to do that if I want them to go outside. I don't want to put the peppers out until about the beginning of May. But this is a great method for peppers and tomatoes. You'll get almost every one of them to sprout, and it's really easy then to deal with the sprouts.
Hey, Dan, on that kind of that whole style of doing things there, is it more specific just to peppers? I mean, could you do any, I feel like I keep asking the same question, you'll have to forgive me, but like, you know, with the heat, there's so many options that you showed today. It's so hard to know, you know, which one to do for each specific, you know, type of vegetable, herb, flower, like whatever it is that you're growing. There's the heat mat, there's the pellets, there's the normal seeds, you know, with the seed starter mix in, you know, one type of pot or another. There's now, you know, wetting them down with the paper towel. There's the seed balls, which is awesome to have so many options. But again, you know, is there a way to know? And one of the things I really want to stress, and you mentioned, is really look at the back of your packaging. You know, if you're buying seeds, especially, you know, the seeds that we offer at Slope, they do a really good job of saying, this is the best time, this is how long it's going to take. But do you have any advice for, you know, specifically now that you're doing the paper towel method, which I saw you do over the summer when we were doing the pepper class, how do you know which ones to do for that and which ones to do in one method or the other? And maybe this is, not an easy question, but hey, I specialize in not easy questions, Dan. That's why you're the expert and I am the talking head in this case.
I love questions that I can't answer. No, well, I do it a little bit by timing and what resources I have available to me. For instance, if I have to do all this outside, then I probably want to use a heat mat. Because you need the extra heat underneath to get things going. If I'm going to do it with seeds that are a little more difficult to sprout, like the milkweeds, I might use the heat mat because it gives me a better chance at more even germination. Most vegetables that you'll grow are really easy to get going. They don't require the heat mat. And I would just go ahead and start those in the little peat pots or the pellets or something like that. And if you have a spot that's a little bit sunny, a windowsill or something like that, that's a great place to experiment with that and get some things going. Lettuces, kale, broccoli, all those things are really easy. Now, one thing I didn't mention, root crops like carrots and radishes, you generally want to start in place. You generally don't want to start those and then have to transplant them because you're likely to break the root, which is what you're going to harvest. So you want to wait till the temperature is right in the spring and plant those right in the ground, generally. Now you can find them in nurseries, and usually you'll find carrots, excuse me, as a mass of carrots in a little cell pack. And you have to soak those and then gently tease them apart so you don't just have a mass of wrinkly old carrots growing together. But starting them in the ground is the way to go. I think it's when you get into slightly more exotic seeds where you have to do a little bit of research and see, well, do I have to treat it a little bit? Will the bottom heat help? Especially if you want to grow native plants, go to the Larner's website and look at some of the wonderful things they have there. And they'll tell you, I think in the website, what kinds, and certainly in the packaging, what kinds of treatments you might need to get the seeds going. But in general, for most of the things that we're likely to grow in our home garden, to start with, just the containers and the soil will be adequate. And then if we're going to branch out from there a little bit, we get into the exciting technology. I have grown hundreds, literally hundreds and hundreds of milkweeds. And I did find that the heat mats are extremely helpful for getting them to get started. I have as much difficulty as anyone else in actually getting them established in the garden. It is not easy, and it takes incredible persistence to keep going, and just eventually one of them takes, and then hopefully it flowers and reproduces, and you have to find the one that thinks that your garden is the place to be, at least in my experience. Let's see, any other questions that have come up?
Let's see the core thing.
Oh, let's look at the quarter, yeah. It looks like it absorbed the water and
Oh, yeah.
and then it's crumbly. And we could mix the perlite with it and turn it into a seed starter mix. Yeah, that's kind of neat. This is the smallest little block of coir that's available here. And I think it was pretty inexpensive. I might have thrown the packaging away that came on it. But there's also a bigger block that is available. And I think that might be kind of fun to work with. The texture is very nice. And I think as part of either a seed starting mix or as a general potting mix, it would be an easy kind of base material to start with. You might want to add a little, if you're making it into a potting soil, I would add a little perlite, and I would add a little compost and a little bit of fertilizer, like a Sure Start or something like that. And it should make a pretty dandy potting soil.
Hey, Dan, can you talk really quickly to, one of the things that people ask all the time when they come in trying to do natives and trying to be, really supportive of California and, Bay Area native plants and things that do well here is California poppies. Is there anything different or specific about starting your own seed? I mean, we, at our store anyway, in the East Bay, we do our best to try to get seedlings in, as often as we can in like 4-inch perennials, but sometimes they're hard to grab from different vendors. And we, sell them as seeds. So is there any different advice in terms of California poppies specifically, in terms of what you've talked about so far?
Yes. California poppy, the problem with California poppies is people see them blooming and come into the nursery to get them. By that time, it's too late to plant them. You want to plant poppies by seed in the fall. And they will sprout up when the rains come and grow through the winter and flower in the very early spring with any luck. By the time you see them flowering on the hillsides or along the highway, it's too late to get them started. Here, it's already starting to dry out. And they need to grow a taproot. And so they're best planted from seed. The seeds are fairly small, but they sprout very readily. We can see poppies in the mixture, the wildflower mixture that's in that container that we planted in November. So the secret really is just get them started in the fall by seed. Know that the birds are going to eat a lot of the seeds. That's normal. It's what they eat. And if you have a package of 1,000 seeds and you get 10 plants, you're doing well. So sprinkle them liberally. The California poppy that was native along the coast and inland as far as about 30 miles is not the pure orange one that we see everywhere. It's a perennial version of the California poppy that has more orange and yellow in it. And you can find that one at Larner's. And occasionally you'll see them at Annie's, or we may get them in from one of those growers. And they'll be called the coastal variety of the California poppy. The big orange one is an annual. And so if it likes the spot and you can get it to bloom, it may reseed itself. But the same plant's not going to be back. They'll go, an annual grows, blooms, makes seeds, and dies. And so that one was native to the Antelope Valley, Southern California, and then got spread around by people who liked it. But it's not native here. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't grow it. It certainly is growing here now, and it's not going to go away, so there's no reason not to grow it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny. I am I'm sure many of the folks tuned in today. I'm a Bay Area girl. I was born and bred here, all over the Bay Area, specifically Berkeley, Oakland. And, you know, then when I was young, I feel like you saw them everywhere. You never thought anything of it. You know, you'd walk even just along the street, they would be in medians and everywhere. And now it seems like you see them so seldom. I know there's a lot of people that are doing their best to kind of bring them back to their yard. So that's really good info, Dan. Thank you so much.
Sure, and some of these mixes, and keep in mind that every wildflower has a little niche of its own and is really only going to be happy in that niche. And you and I we don't know enough to know which niche is going to work for which plant perfect. So with the mixtures, you can throw them out there and hope for the best.
Right.
And when they take, they're wonderful, and they may even produce. Yep.
And then it's nice because then you've put enough different things down that if one doesn't take, then it's not like you'll end up with nothing.
That's right.
Perfect. Wow, that's amazing. It's so much information, you know, and you've presented so many different possibilities for ways too. And I think, you know, even my line of questioning now that I'm thinking about it, like I keep trying to press you into this, you know, say what's the best, say what's the thing to do. And, you know, you're right. The point is that there's so many different options. You kind of, it's a lot of trial and error, but I guess that's kind of gardening in a nutshell, right?
Right, and you know, use what you've already got.
Sure.
I have grown things in muffin tins.
Right.
They're not the easiest because they don't drain.
Right.
I didn't drill holes in them, although you could do that.
Right.
But you can use anything you've got at home to grow seeds in.
Yeah.
Egg cartons are wonderful.
Sure. Yeah.
Egg cartons are terrific.
So many options. And I mean, again, and not to plug the store, but here we are, let's plug the store. You know, again, come down. There's so many things that you can choose from. You know, we kind of have options for everybody and every situation. And, you know, there's so much knowledgeable staff at all of the stores. Definitely come down and put our, you know, our knowledge to the test, and let's figure out what works best for, you know, your home and your space. And, you know, hopefully we can give you some tips and some pointers on how to be a better gardener, you know, and be able to answer as many questions as possible. So thank you so much, Dan, for all the info today and all the possibilities. As usual, I feel more educated just having been here for the last hour and a half. So thank you. That's not only information for our whole our audience, but also for us too to take back to the store. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Cool. Okay, so for everybody that's tuned in, know that we will post this webinar next Tuesday as usual. Please do the survey on your link that you'll receive at the end of this, just to give us some information on what was helpful, you know, what we can change, what our next steps are. And as we look forward to new classes, you know, maybe even just what you are looking forward to learning about. I will see you on Wednesday. Please tune in for our what to do in your garden this month, giving you guys a chance to get ready for spring gardening. And then also how to make seed balls. Dan gave us a lot of info on, you know, how to kind of make your own. And this twist coming up next Saturday will really be geared a little bit more towards how to do it with kids, but, you know, also just doing your own and just all the options that Dan mentioned, and also just ideas from our presenter. It's been a pleasure, you guys. Hope that you have a great weekend. We're really looking forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Goodbye from Sloat, guys.